Cents Per Mile, featuring Charles Gracie, Paul Gibson, and Josh Haynes. Everyone knows the trucking industry has issues, but most people are afraid to talk about it.
Someone's got to do it.
With loads of recruiting and marketing experience and backed by the largest driver audience in the world, we deliver carriers the driver perspective, find solutions, and help make sense make sense.
Welcome to Cents Per Mile. I'm your host, Charles Gracie.
And I'm your co-host, Paul Gibson.
Hey, I'm Josh Haynes. Gentlemen, what are we talking about today?
Talking about dealing with rejection, and I'm not talking about the high school first dance asking out. I'm talking about, as a recruiter, dealing with rejection.
Yep. I mean, that's pretty much like the vast majority of the job is just people telling you no.
Could you imagine how many people would sign up for that job if it was actually in the description that you were going to be told more no's than yeses on a daily basis?
But just to get some stuff out of the way really quick, we are on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, etc. Anywhere you get your podcasts. We're also on YouTube. So if you could subscribe on there, and then rate the podcast, that helps us, get a little bit more traction and get out there.
You know what else helps us? If you go to centspermilepodcast.com and suggest a topic, submit to be a guest, or even to be a sponsor.
And speaking of sponsors, who is our sponsor today, Charles?
We got Drivers Legal Plan. Drivers Legal Plan is a national law firm dedicated to protecting the rights of drivers and their ability to drive, therefore protecting the interests of the trucking companies. Check them out at driverslegalplan.com.
All right, and now it's time for the news. All right, so it's time for 10-2 News, where we go through CDLLife and we check out some of the coolest articles from the past couple weeks, and we talk about it. So the first one, OOIDA, a great friend of the show, is applauding a bipartisan bill to help fight freight fraud, which is, it's definitely been there's been a huge uptick of, double brokering, etc. I don't necessarily have faith that it's going to get passed because we've had a lot of struggles with that, the past couple of years. But at the same time, it's cool to see that someone's actually taking action on it.
Yeah, I mean, it's cool that there's still attention around it. The industry's been buzzing about it for some time. The fact that we're in 2024 and we haven't addressed this is beyond me. But hey, I like seeing things go up to Congress and not go anywhere. So I'm here for it.
Well, I mean, at the same time, I mean, there's definitely been, first off, it's illegal. So there has been action taken. It's just people have found a lot of loopholes and people are doing it anyway. And just because it's a law, I mean, no one's really been cracking down on it.
I got an idea. You know how we put all those IRS agents out there? Maybe we could put a bunch of people out there to address this.
Yeah, I mean, that'd make a pretty solid task force.
Where would they start? Would they wind up in like Europe? That's where a lot of this starts.
Anyways, so the next story, there is a video that has recently surfaced that shows a driver using his phone to control a Tesla semi. Not obviously driving, but like they can use their phone to honk the horn, adjust the air conditioning, basically just almost about everything but actually drive, which is cool. That's great. I've got a smart home, that kind of thing. But at the same time, is that a great idea? Well,
it's like a lot of things in trucking. It sounds like a good idea. It sounds cool until we get to the execution of it. I just foresee this from a driver's perspective. All right, you're going to give them tools that are on the phone. Now, there are going to be some individuals that don't think this through and try to use these features on the phone while they're driving, and, well, they're going to get cell phone violations. So I'm interested to see how this plays out.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like we were talking about a different subject earlier off the show, and, we agreed that, the path to hell is paved with good intentions. And so it's one of those things where it's like, this kind of seems like a setup. It's one of those things where like, oh, this would be a cool idea to implement this, but like nobody really thinks about those repercussions. And, and I don't know, it showed in the video. I don't know what the other alternatives are. And so I would be curious if some of this does kind of put that driver in that position. But that being said, it is time for Behind the Wheel. All right, so it's time for Behind the Wheel. Being partnered and powered by CDLLife, we actually have access to the largest driver audience in the world. So we can ask them questions and get real opinions from real drivers about real issues. But this week, we're talking about rejection. And so I thought it'd be really interesting to just actually talk to Charles, because he's spent time on both sides of it. He's been a driver, he's been a recruiter. And so as a recruiter, he's got a pretty interesting take about how he used to interact with recruiters as a driver. In fact, having been a recruiter myself, kind of pisses me off to know what he was doing.
Well, I'm glad that you elaborated on that, because that opening sentence had me laughing over here when you're like, hey, dealing with rejection, we're going to talk to Charles. uh, but yes, life in a recruiter's shoes is nothing but rejection, and you have to be able to overcome it. You have to be able to combat those rebuttals. You have to be able to have a conversation. A no now doesn't mean a no forever.
Right. And we've established that, and we're going to talk to you about it. Tell the people what you used to do to recruiters.
Yeah, okay, we're gonna go there. So when I was a driver, you know how you had those ads on the back of trailers like, we guarantee to pay you more. Well, I'm in a truck, I'm by myself, and I can't bug my wife all day long, otherwise I might not have one. So I'd call those recruiting numbers and give them a hard time and like, oh, you guarantee more. What's a guarantee? And then I'd purposely like raise the bar and just kind of push them to the envelope. What I found out is a lot of drivers did this. They want to talk to people, and you never know where a conversation might go. I became friends with a lot of the people I talked to, but not after I was, not having my fun busting their chops along the way.
Yeah. I mean, and that checks out. And I think that's actually a good way to kind of keep tabs on how things are flowing in the industry, for for you looking out for your own, way to make a living.
Speaking of keeping tabs, we need to go to behind the desk with Tenstreet. So this week on Behind the Desk, we have Ashley Pearson. She's the account manager over at Tenstreet, and she's joining us to share some insights. How's it going, Ashley?
Hey, how are you?
I'm here. It's a new week, so what do you got?
Well, I was a recruiter in my past life as well, and I think that handling rejection is all about your mindset when it comes to recruiting. In my mind, there is no such thing as rejection. Here at Tenstreet, we always talk about implementing at the right interval, and I think the same happens with recruiting. And so it's not a not ever, it's just a not now. And you have to take that not now as an opportunity to be able to build your pipeline so that you can reconnect with those drivers in the future. But then also you have to understand that trucking is word of mouth. And even though it might not be a good position for that driver, you never know who he's going to talk to, who he's going to interact with, that it may be a great opportunity for another driver. So you have to decide that that no is not a no forever, but just a no for that moment. And at the core of it, recruiting is just a sales position, and every sales position has a sales cycle. And based on your position, your sales cycle is going to be different. And so it might take multiple contacts with that driver for you to be able to close the sale, but also understanding that every no gets you closer to a yes. So you just have to change your mindset that there is no such thing as rejection when you're recruiting.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. And for those of you listening, that advice goes across many different verticals, including marriage. No's can eventually be a yes if you just badger enough.
Yeah. Hey, that's surprisingly true. That being said, it is time for an ad break.
Attention truckers, it only takes one ticket to lose your job because of unnecessary traffic convictions. But you can protect your career with Driver's Legal Plan, an actual national law firm dedicated to protecting the rights of truck drivers. We make the highest quality legal representation available to truck drivers, and we make it affordable. You can rest easy knowing you have a trucker's attorney always on your side. Call Driver's Legal Plan today to start protecting your driving record and your career.
All right, so it's time to get to our main topic and make sense. So this week we're talking about rejection as a recruiter. I mean, when you think about it, you talk to 100 drivers, and then on average, you get like 10% of them to actually like be interested and apply, and then what you get, right? And then you get like 5% of them that actually get approved, and then you get like 50% of that actually show up to orientation, So, I mean, rejection is definitely a part of the job. And I mean, yeah. So Charles, we'll get your take real quick.
Listen, at Hot Seat Services, we're dealing with drivers and carriers all the time. It's always about bridging that gap and having communication. Part of that communication you may like, and some of it you might not. Rejection is part of it, and being able to handle it. I could go around out there trying to procure all the different lanes and try to make everyone happy and throw some weenie juice back and make everyone laugh. But at the end of the day, people are going to say no. And when they say no, you have to be able to overcome that, and you have to be able to ask why. So one of the things that I've practiced, and it was one of the most instrumental things that I learned as a recruiter, was asking why. If a driver said no, hey, why did you say no? Was it something I said or didn't say? Was it something I did or didn't do? And then taking that feedback constructively and being prepared to make actual change on it. Sometimes in asking those questions, I've actually flipped a no to a yes, because many recruiters just take no and move on.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that comes with communication and building relationships by being able to have that open communication. And that's kind of how I viewed it. I was like looking at it more from the driver perspective than my perspective. It's the idea that these people are calling you because they're interested in making a better life for themselves, improving the quality of their lives and finding a better job. And that being said, you got to realize also from your company's perspective, you want to make sure the people that you're bringing in are the right fit. It's not if you could bring in everybody, then you're going to bring in a lot of people who aren't a good fit. And not just because they're not a good fit on paper, they're just not going to have the best time at your company. Maybe because they have something better already, or there's a better offer that suits them better. So not only are by accepting those no's, are you helping more drivers go be able to find a fit that's better for them, you're also helping your company by making sure the people that come through the door are people that want to be there
and should be there. And that's the thing, often in recruiting, we get hung up on getting the yeses, but think of how many times we reject people. So of all people that should be able to handle rejection, it's the people that are also dishing it out. And you need to have that perspective that for as many that tell you no, think of how many you've told no. Especially in this market.
Well, that, and then but sometimes it does make it hard when the metric that's typically used to judge whether or not you're doing a good job is by how many yeses you get, which simultaneously, because of the number of no's you get, makes you feel like you're terrible at your job, especially when you're going through like one of those months. You might have a lot of good months, but then you have that month where like you're coming up short. You're seeing a bunch of zeros just because there is a lot of recruiting that is basically rolling the dice every time you call somebody.
Well, the worst thing a recruiter can do to themselves is get in their own way, get in their own head. You hit those funks and it happens. You're not going to win all the time. But when you start getting those no's, instead of giving up and throwing your hands up and getting in your own head and getting in your own way, you should just move forward and try to improvise, try to have conversations. Often they get hung up on those no's and those bad months or bad weeks, and it just one thing turns into 10. One bad week can turn into 10 bad weeks. So that's why I'm excited that we're covering this today, and we got some interesting guests that are going to come on and share their perspectives.
Yeah, and I totally agree. And speaking of interesting, I think it's time to throw it over to Tommy.
How you doing, Paul?
Oh, doing pretty good, man. Hanging in there.
Good thing. Charles, how are you? Good?
I'm glad that you're here to shed some of that experience, man. We've had a lot of conversations, and it's really exciting to get you on Cents Per Mile to share some of those perspectives. So thank you.
No, I appreciate you guys having me on. And to that point, Charles, you and I kind of follow the same, path. I was a driver before I became a recruiter, so it kind of gave me a little bit more insight on how to recruit drivers. You've got to it's a sales position. Recruiting is a sales position, regardless of whether people want to believe that or not. And I always took a consultative selling approach to it. Tailor the conversation to exactly what the candidate is looking for. Ask the right questions and then move forward. And if you get a rejection, it's not your fault. To your point, you said, ask the question, ask the reason why. And it could have been something that was misunderstood or something that was not necessarily portrayed correctly. and you can turn that no into a yes. But if you don't turn that no into a yes, you can't really blame yourself. And I teach my recruiters to not expect rejection, but prepare yourself for if it does come. It's not a lack of your ability or anything that you did wrong. It's just sometimes not a really good fit at all.
Yeah, and I think that's important to understand. And just like as having the conversation, as you proceed through the conversation, asking those questions. So it might be, hey, it's a no. Well, all right, what am I up against? Who else are you talking to? Start to find out those answers to those questions, and you can combat those in conversations and have a meaningful connection with that driver. And again, it might not be yes today, but it might be yes a month from now or a year from now. And you will never know if you don't have those conversations.
Yeah, and that's a true story. And one of the things that I preach to my recruiting team is trust the process. You know what you're doing. You know how excuse me. You know what you're doing, and you know how to do it. So as long as you trust the process and have that self motivation, you'll be fantastic.
So you're the director of recruiting over at Hansen and Adkins, and you guys kind of a niche job. I mean, it's not just like, hey, a dry van goes here to there. I mean, these drivers are doing a little bit more than that. So I imagine those conversations are a little different for you and your team.
And they are, which is why I kind of teach that consultative selling. You've got to be able to cater that conversation to the candidates and find out their interest and exactly what they're looking for. Because to your point, an auto hauler is a very, very labor intensive position. You're not bumping a dock. You're not sitting there loading and unloading. You're actually moving the freight. You're up there on the trailer, loading and unloading, strapping. So you have to get that point across and make sure that the candidate knows exactly what to expect.
And to be clear on that, I mean, if you're an auto hauler, you can bump a dock. It's just not going to end well for either side.
You might have some damage claims on that one. We want to steer clear of that for sure.
No, hey, I appreciate you coming on the show to share, those perspectives that you see in the side of the industry and the experience that you've had as a driver and now someone that's over a team. So if someone wanted to reach out to you guys, how would they find you?
Yeah, you can go to driveforhansenatkins.com. Check out if you're looking out for a new position as an auto hauler, you want to change in your career, definitely come out and give us a call.
So we've also gotten in the habit of asking at least our first guests the question of who is your favorite person on the show?
Got to be Josh. He's the man behind the scenes making it run.
I'll take that. All right. Well, that being said, it is time to go to another ad break. Reputation is everything when it comes to your brand, but it can be hard to maintain and even harder to quantify. With CDLLife's Reputation Watch tool, you can get access to insights from the largest driver audience in the world. Drivers will be anonymously presented a short survey about your company. Then we'll deliver you the data showing how you're perceived by drivers and the level of awareness you have within the market, better enabling you to leverage other awareness tools effectively and efficiently to improve and grow your brand. This tool could change everything. All right, so today we're talking about rejection as a recruiter and how to deal with it. The interesting thing, though, that I've found, and I'm sure Charles would agree, is that there's also ways to kind of help mitigate that rejection. Obviously, you can't change it, but there is a way to run into it a little bit less, because a lot of drivers will automatically hit you with knee-jerk reactions, such as stuff about equipment and other things. And a lot of times there's an answer that you can give that is true, so it's not anything sneaky, but to help kind of mitigate that and realize that there's a trade-off. It's like you may want A, but we also have B and C. And so I know A might not work, but does B and C balance out A? So
yeah, it's like when a driver wants local, home daily, and $2,000 a week.
Yeah, and it's like I can get you home every 3 days and get you $2,000 a week. But that being said, Charles, how do you use responses to knee-jerk reactions to help like elevate your acceptance rate?
Certainly, that's a good question, and the answer is education. I want to have a conversation, and it revolves around education. So I ask them their wants and needs, and they might come back with the response of, hey, I don't like this. Well, first off, I'm going to explain why that exists. And then I'm going to align that with their expectations. So, we always joke, just like I just did, about, hey, I want local, home daily, $2,000 a week. Well, those two things generally don't align. If you want $2,000 a week, hey, we can talk that, but I'm not going to be able to get you home daily. And through having a conversation, what you'll do is you'll align their thinking with the expectations and the realization of what's actually out there. So what's more important to you? Is it the money or the home time? Let's have that conversation first, and then let's get aligned towards which direction we're going to go. But you often have to have that conversation and align that conversation with their true wants versus what that knee-jerk reaction coming out on their side is, and then getting that knee-jerk reaction as a recruiter and saying, oh, no, I can't do that. Move on.
Well, and I think that's huge too. Because a lot of times, like it comes back to, communication. But also, the show is kind of based around providing the driver perspective on things. And I think that's huge, especially with the reputation recruiters have gotten over the years of being like liars and that kind of stuff, which we've covered on the show. I think having those conversations is huge because that gives you a sense of credibility and a sense of authenticity that you're more than willing to, instead of just telling the driver, yes, I can get you whatever you want. Like you now are saying, hey man, I can't do that. But I can do this or this. And it lets them know that like, yes, your job is to try and get them in, but you're willing to essentially let them off the hook if they don't like your answers, but you can then, tell them like, hey, we don't have that, but we do have this. Do you like it? And it lets them know that you're just being real with them.
Well, and that's the key. You have to be real with them. These are real people with really important needs and responsibilities to their families and their livelihoods. So you have to treat that with the respect it deserves. And you can't be scared to have conversations as a recruiter and neuter your efforts to bring in the right people, because at the end of the day, that's your job. The people signing your check is the people you work for. You have to bring in the right drivers, and you have to be willing to have those conversations. It's a lot easier to have them on the front end when it's a conversation than when they're sitting in your orientation with a price tag lingering over their head that someone spent to bring them there to find out that you didn't have that conversation. Oftentimes recruiters are hung up on being worried about getting the no, and they avoid those conversations when really, if we just had them up front, it's a lot easier.
Well, and I think that's super important to, like viewing them as people. I think sometimes that gets lost when you are in the rat race of trying to get numbers and you've been rejected a lot lately. These drivers are people and this is their well-being. So when you're getting rejected, you're allowing that driver to continue to look for something that's going to improve their quality of life. And so they are people. But also, speaking of people, Brad Hackett, how's it going, man?
Rock and rolling. How are you doing, Paul? Thanks for having me.
Oh yeah, man. Anytime. Doing pretty good. You obviously have recruiting experience, and we've hung out several times and I know you know what you're doing. So yeah, we kind of wanted your take on dealing with rejection as a driver recruiter.
Yeah, absolutely. I got the call from Charles and I knew he went through his phone list and picked the friends that probably got the most prom date rejections back in the day. So well equipped for this, starting from that. But it starts with your team. We're managing a team of recruiters. Tommy mentioned before, recruiting is sales in the episode. You want to equip the toolbox and understanding that you are going to face that rejection. But one of the great things I got from a prior mentor is building out those common rebuttal reasons. So you're going to face different things as a recruiter about your program that aren't going to be that exact fit for the driver. But you can build those talking points and equip your recruiters to help overcome those and help categorize those to equip them with the tools necessary to handle that conversation.
Preparing your team's one of the most important things, and it's often overlooked. Everyone wants to spend money in the marketing. Everyone wants to make sure the branding and message is aligned. But not everyone invests time into their team preparing them for that rejection. Everyone wants to assume that they have the best thing since sliced bread and they're all going to get all the yeses in the world, but that's just not the job.
Yeah, my team at C1 Transportation, we're going after highly equipped, highly skilled, good safety record, experienced flatbed drivers that want to do lease purchase. It's incredibly niche. It's not for everybody. And all that does is really narrow down your pool of candidates that are going to be a fit. So you have to equip your recruiters to really hone in on that niche, get your advertising right, but also have those talking points in place proactively to get the right fit for the organization that's making that move for their family to your organization that they want to better their situation.
Well, and I think that's a huge thing, preparing your team, right? But a lot of people tend to, when they do that, to get all the messaging and stuff together, tend to toss out scripts and formulas for things, and that's a very common thing in sales. And I don't think that's the best way to go about it. But I mean, in your experience, do you think by equipping your recruiters allows them to actually have conversations, so they have the knowledge and then they can just have free flowing conversations? And what does that do for the process? And have you seen that actually increase their ability to get hires?
Yeah, great question, Paul. One of my favorite exercises with my team is help building their own script. There are certain things that I want to make sure we're covering in an initial pitch with the driver, of making sure they understand the nuts and bolts of our program, what our equipment, what our home time, what our hiring requirements are, etc. But the recruiter needs to build their own style to that. If you hand somebody a doc and have them read a Google Doc every single time, it sounds like a robot, and you might as well hire an AI recruiter to do that for you. You got to have a sales team and a sales mindset that is building their own pitch, so it is authentic and it's their own voice and it's their own way of selling the positives to your organization.
And you imagine, so you talked about the niche side of things where you guys are trying to communicate a lease purchase offer. So no is going to be heard even more so in that, with all the stigmas that come with lease purchase. So like when we're talking people that can solidly tell you some advice regarding rejection, it's definitely the people that are trying to communicate a lease purchase offer in this current climate. I mean, there's a lot of conversations. There's a lot of stigmas you and your team have to get past in that initial messaging versus the typical carrier that's got dedicated company lanes.
Absolutely. And another thing is what the driver is wanting. Do they want a $200,000 custom truck, but they also want to put $0 down and not have it against their credit? It's navigating that driver through the situation to understand what you have to offer and make sure it's a good fit.
That's awesome. Well, hey, Brad, if someone wanted to talk to you or your team or get some more insights on this, how would they reach out to you?
Yeah, drive4c1.com, or we're all over LinkedIn and social media. Come check us out at C1 Transportation.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on Cents Per Mile.
Thanks for having me.
All right, gentlemen, as much as I would like to sit around and talk about how you two were rejected on the best person on Cents Per Mile, it is time to wrap this episode up.
Yeah, Josh, I couldn't say it better myself. Till next time, thank you for tuning in to Cents Per Mile. I'm your host, Charles Gracie.
And I'm your co-host, Paul Gibson. See you next time.